The notebook was sitting there like a loaded gun on our kitchen counter, and I almost walked right past it. Almost. But something about the way Lena had positioned it, just slightly askew, like she'd slammed it shut in a hurry, made me pause with my coffee mug halfway to my lips. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Caleb Torrin, 44 years old, financial analyst for a mid-sized firm in suburban Ohio, and I've spent the last 20 years of my life reading people through numbers. When someone's hiding something, their spreadsheets tell the story before their mouths do. But this wasn't a spreadsheet. This was my wife's handwriting, and the words Project Liberation were scrawled across the top in her familiar purple ink. My hands were steady as I opened the notebook. They always are when I'm processing data, even when that data happens to be my own personal apocalypse. Phase 1. Document Caleb's weaknesses. Financial dependence on joint accounts, emotional isolation from friends, predictable routines. I took a sip of coffee. Still steady. Phase 2. Establish alternative support network. Evan provides emotional, physical needs. Mara handles legal consultation. Bookstore provides financial independence foundation. Evan. I knew that name. Tall guy, salt and pepper beard, always browsing the mystery section at Lena's bookstore with the intensity of someone who wasn't really there for the books. I'd met him twice, maybe 3 times. Firm handshake, direct eye contact, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were in on some private joke. Except, apparently, I was the joke. Phase 3. Asset protection and extraction. Caleb's 401k, house equity, joint savings. Mara researching legal precedents for maximum acquisition. My sister-in-law, Mara, the divorce attorney who'd been coming over for girls' nights, with increasing frequency. The same Mara who always asked pointed questions about my work, my investments, my retirement planning. I'd thought she was just being friendly. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands still rock steady, my breathing still normal. 20 years of analyzing hostile takeovers had prepared me for this moment better than any marriage counselor ever could have. The final page was the kicker. Phase 4. Clean removal, minimal confrontation, maximum extraction. Caleb's emotional dependence will work in our favor. He'll be too devastated to fight effectively. Timeline, complete by Christmas. New year, new life. I closed the notebook, placed it exactly where I'd found it, and finished my coffee. Outside, November rain drummed against the windows of our comfortable suburban home, the home I'd apparently been paying for while my wife planned to steal it from me. Lena's car pulled into the driveway at 11:47 p.m. I was in my home office, ostensibly reviewing quarterly reports, actually transferring money into accounts she didn't know existed. The front door opened with her familiar key jingle, followed by the soft thud of her purse hitting the hall table. "Caleb, you still up?" "In here," I called, not looking up from my laptop. She appeared in the doorway, her dark hair slightly mussed, lipstick refreshed but not quite perfect. She'd been somewhere that required looking good, but not somewhere she'd expected to stay looking good. "How was inventory?" I asked. "Tedious. You know how it is." She leaned against the door frame, and I caught a whiff of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Something expensive with bergamot and cedar notes. The kind of thing a man wears when he wants to make an impression. "I saved you some dinner. It's in the fridge." "Thanks, but I grabbed something earlier." Another lie, smooth as silk. "Don't stay up too late, okay? You've been working too hard lately." Such concern for my well-being. I wondered if she'd practiced that line with Evan, or if it came naturally. "Just finishing up some year-end planning. You know me, always thinking ahead." She smiled, kissed the top of my head like she had 1,000 times before, and headed upstairs. I listened to her footsteps, the bathroom door closing, the shower starting. All normal sounds of our normal life, except now I knew exactly how abnormal everything really was. I opened a new browser window and started researching divorce attorneys. Not Mara's firm, obviously. I needed someone who specialized in asset protection, someone who understood that the best defense is a good offense, someone who wouldn't be surprised when I told them my wife was planning to financially eviscerate me with the help of my own sister-in-law. The shower was still running when I found exactly what I was looking for. 3 weeks into my new life as a man marked for destruction, I was starting to understand why people develop drinking problems. Not that I was drinking more, I needed my wits sharp, but I could see the appeal of numbing the constant low-grade rage that had taken up residence in my chest. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. I'm a numbers guy. I understand that 50% of marriages end in divorce, and a significant percentage of those involve infidelity. What got to me was the methodical nature of it all. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a business plan, and I was the asset being liquidated. I'd started keeping a journal of my own, documenting every lie, every inconsistency, every time Lena's story didn't add up. The woman who used to tell me everything now had more gaps in her schedule than a Swiss cheese factory. "Working late again tonight," she announced over breakfast, not looking up from her phone. "Big shipment coming in, and you know how the staff gets overwhelmed." Lena's bookstore, Chapter and Verse, employed exactly 3 people: herself, a college kid named Jamie who worked weekends, and Mrs. Chen who came in Tuesday afternoons to handle the rare book appraisals. Overwhelming them would require a shipment roughly the size of the Library of Alexandria. "Need any help?" I offered, just to watch her squirm. No, you hate inventory. Besides, Mara's going to stop by and help out." Of course she was. The holy trinity of Project Liberation, working late into the night, probably celebrating how easy this was all going to be. Poor, predictable Caleb, so trusting, so naive, so completely unaware that his life was being dismantled piece by piece. "That's nice of her. Tell her I said hi." Lena finally looked up, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance that I was being so agreeable. She'd probably been hoping for more resistance, more drama. It would make the final phase easier if she could paint me as the unreasonable one. "I will. Oh, and don't wait up. You know how we get when we start talking." I knew exactly how they got when they started talking. I'd been listening. That evening, I drove to the gym I'd joined the week before, a decision that had raised some eyebrows at home, since I'd never shown much interest in fitness. But Mick's boxing gym wasn't about fitness. It was about learning to hit things properly, and more importantly, it was about having somewhere to go that wasn't home. Mick himself was a 60-something former Golden Gloves champion who'd seen enough of life to recognize a man in crisis when one walked through his doors. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer advice, just pointed me toward the heavy bag and told me to keep my thumbs outside my fists unless I wanted to break them. "You're getting better," he observed, as I worked through combinations he'd taught me. "Still telegraphing your right hook, but the anger's giving you power." "What makes you think I'm angry?" He snorted. "Son, I've been training fighters for 30 years. Happy men don't show up here at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday looking like they want to murder a punching bag. Wife troubles?" I paused mid-combination. "That obvious?" "The wedding ring's an obvious giveaway. Also, you keep muttering under your breath. Something about phases and liberation. Want to talk about it?" So I told him. Not everything, I'm not stupid, but enough. The mysterious late nights, the sudden interest in our finances, the way Lena had started treating me like a roommate she was planning to evict. Mick listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, sometimes wincing. "You got proof?" he asked when I finished. "Some. Working on more." "Good. But here's the thing about fighting. Whether it's in the ring or in life, you can't just react. You got to think 3 moves ahead. She's planning something, you need to be planning something better." He was right, of course. I'd been so focused on gathering evidence that I hadn't been thinking strategically. Lena and her accomplices were playing chess while I was still trying to figure out what game we were playing. That night, I sat in my home office with a legal pad and started planning my own project. If Lena wanted to play the long game, she was about to discover that she wasn't the only one who could think strategically. I started with the assets. Our house was jointly owned, but I'd put down the entire down payment from my inheritance when my father passed away. The mortgage payments came from my salary, the property taxes from my accounts. Legally, she was entitled to half, but proving her contribution might be more difficult than she assumed. The 401k was trickier, accumulated during marriage, definitely subject to division. But there were ways to minimize damage, especially if I could demonstrate that she'd been planning this for months. Courts didn't look kindly on premeditated financial ambushes. Then there was the bookstore. Lena had always claimed it was her independence, her creative outlet, her contribution to our partnership. What she'd never mentioned was that I'd been subsidizing it for 3 years. Every time it ran short, which was frequently, she'd asked for loans from our joint account. Loans that were never repaid, never even acknowledged as debts. I pulled out the bank statements and started adding up the transfers. $43,000 over 3 years. Money that had come from my salary, my bonuses, my careful financial planning. Money that had been keeping her little dream afloat while she planned to sink mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Going to be really late. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. 3 months ago, those words would have made me smile. Now they just felt like another lie in an increasingly elaborate fiction. I texted back, no problem. Love you too. Because two could play the deception game, and I was just getting started. The thing about small towns is that everyone knows everyone's business, except when they don't. Lena thought she was being discreet with her Tuesday and Thursday evening inventory sessions, but she'd underestimated both the local gossip network and my willingness to become part of it. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down was a retired librarian with too much time and an excellent view of the street from her kitchen window. She'd always been friendly in that polite suburban way, but when I started taking evening walks past her house, something I'd never done before, she began offering commentary. Your wife's been working awful late lately, she mentioned one Thursday evening as I paused to admire her garden. Saw her leave around 6:30, but her car's not at the bookstore. I kept my expression neutral. Oh? Maybe she went to dinner first. Maybe, though I did see that nice man with the beard pick her up, the one who's been coming around lately. Friend of yours? Evan. Of course. Business associate, I said smoothly. Something to do with rare book acquisitions. Mrs. Patterson nodded, but her eyes said she wasn't buying it. Well, it's nice she has help with the heavy lifting. Those book boxes can be murder on the back. I filed that conversation away with all the others I'd been collecting. Amazing how much intelligence you could gather just by being friendly and asking the right questions. The real breakthrough came when Jamie, the weekend employee at the bookstore, let something slip during what he thought was casual conversation. I'd stopped by Saturday afternoon to bring Lena lunch, the devoted husband routine, and found him rearranging the mystery section. Oh, hey, Mr. Torrin. Mrs. Torrin's in the back with that guy again, the one who's always here on weekdays. Evan? I asked, as if I barely remembered the name. Yeah, that's him. Weird how he never actually buys anything, you know? Just comes in, talks to Mrs. Torrin for like an hour, then leaves. Been happening for months. Months. Not weeks, months. This had been going on longer than I'd realized. Well, some people just like to browse, I said. Did you want me to tell her I'm here? Nah, they looked pretty deep in conversation. Something about plans and timelines, probably boring business stuff. Plans and timelines. I thanked Jamie, left the lunch with him, and drove home to update my files. The timeline was becoming clearer, and it was worse than I'd thought. This wasn't a recent development. It was a long-term operation. That evening, I decided it was time to accelerate my own timeline. Lena, we need to talk about money. She looked up from her book, immediately wary. What about money? I've been doing some year-end financial planning, and I noticed some irregularities in our accounts. Large transfers to the bookstore that I don't remember discussing. The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. Those were loans. We talked about them. Did we? Because I don't have any record of repayment terms or interest rates. For tax purposes, I need to know if these were gifts, loans, or investments. They were loans. I'll pay them back when the store's doing better. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared. That's fine. I just need you to sign these promissory notes for the IRS. Standard stuff. Principal amount, interest rate, repayment schedule. Nothing complicated. She stared at the papers like they were written in Sanskrit. I don't understand why we need formal documents. We're married. Because $43,000 is enough to trigger an audit if the IRS decides these were gifts instead of loans. I'm trying to protect both of us. 43,000. I watched that number hit her like a physical blow. She'd known she was taking money, but she'd never added it up, never realized how much she'd extracted from our joint future to fund her private plans. I need to think about this. Of course. Take your time. Just remember, if we get audited and can't document these as legitimate business loans, we could be looking at penalties and back taxes, not to mention the impact on your bookstore's financial records. I left the papers on the table and went upstairs, listening to her frantically dialing her phone. Mara, probably, or maybe Evan. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd just introduced chaos into their careful planning. The next morning, Lena was gone before I woke up, and she didn't come home until after midnight. When she did, she was drunk and angry. "You're trying to control me," she slurred, standing in our bedroom doorway like an avenging angel who'd lost her way. "Making me sign papers, tracking every penny. This isn't a marriage, it's a business arrangement." "Funny," I said, not looking up from my book. "I was thinking the same thing." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if that meant what she thought it meant. But she was too drunk and too rattled to pursue it. "We'll talk tomorrow," she mumbled, and stumbled toward the bathroom. We didn't talk tomorrow, or the day after. Lena had entered full avoidance mode, leaving early and coming home late, communicating only through notes and text messages. It was like living with a hostile ghost. But I wasn't idle. I'd started my own project, and unlike hers, mine was built on truth instead of deception. Every conversation was recorded on my phone. Every financial document was copied and stored in multiple locations. Every lie was documented and cross-referenced. I also started making some calls of my own, to our insurance agent, updating beneficiaries, to my HR department, changing emergency contacts, to my financial advisor, discussing asset protection strategies for hypothetical divorce scenarios. By the time Lena realized what was happening, the game would already be over. She just didn't know it yet. The confrontation I'd been expecting finally came on a Tuesday evening in early December. I was in my office, updating spreadsheets that tracked every lie Lena had told in the past month, 47 and counting, when I heard voices in the kitchen. Angry voices. "Told you he was suspicious, but you said he was too trusting to figure it out." That was Mara, and she sounded furious. "Never seen him like this before. It's like he's become a different person." Lena, scared and defensive. "Financial documents could ruin everything. If he's talked to a lawyer..." A third voice, male, Evan. I saved my work, closed the laptop, and walked downstairs like I owned the place, which, according to the property deed I'd reviewed that afternoon, I mostly did. All three of them were clustered around our kitchen island, papers spread between them like battle plans. They looked up when I entered, and the guilt on their faces was almost comical. "Evening," I said pleasantly. "Don't mind me, just getting some water." The silence was deafening. Lena recovered first, her attorney-trained sister probably having coached her on damage control. Caleb, we were just discussing some business matters. Bookstore stuff. Of course you were. I filled a glass from the tap, taking my time. Evan, nice to see you again. How's the rare book business treating you? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. It's good. Steady. Excellent. Always nice to meet a fellow businessman. What's your specialty? First editions? Manuscripts? Or do you focus more on acquisitions? The word hung in the air like smoke. Mara shot Lena a look that could have melted steel. Caleb, Lena said carefully, is there something you want to say? I took a sip of water, considering. 3 weeks ago, I would have backed down, apologized for interrupting, retreated to my office like the good little husband I'd been trained to be. But 3 weeks ago, I hadn't known I was living with enemies. Actually, yes. I've been doing some thinking about our financial situation, and I have some concerns. What kind of concerns? Mara's lawyer voice, all professional caution. Well, for starters, I'm concerned about the $43,000 that's been transferred from our joint accounts to fund the bookstore without any formal loan documentation. From a tax perspective, that's problematic. Lena's face went white. We discussed this. No, we didn't. I brought you papers to sign, and you've been avoiding the subject ever since. Which brings me to my second concern, the pattern of deception that's been developing in our household. Deception? Evan's voice cracked slightly on the word. Late nights that don't match business hours, mysterious phone calls, sudden interest in our financial assets, conversations that stop when I enter the room. I gestured toward the papers on the island. Speaking of which, what are we looking at here? More bookstore business? Mara started gathering the documents, but I'd already seen enough. Legal letterhead, asset valuation forms, divorce preparation materials. Interesting business you're running, Lena. Very diversified. The mask finally slipped. All three of them realized simultaneously that their careful planning had been discovered, and the reactions were telling. Mara went into lawyer mode, calculating damage. Evan looked like he wanted to run. Lena just looked defeated. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough. The real question is, how long have you been planning this? Silence. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been running a long-term operation to systematically extract assets from our marriage while building a case for maximum alimony. With the help of your sister's legal expertise and your boyfriend's, what's your role here, Evan? Emotional support? Financial planning? Or are you just the exit strategy? Evan stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do. This is my house. A fact you'll discover is more legally significant than you might think, and you're here by my sufferance. So sit down, shut up, and let the adults finish talking. Something in my voice made him sit. Maybe it was the boxing training, or maybe it was just the accumulated rage of months of deception finally finding its voice. Caleb, please, Lena started, but I held up a hand. My turn to talk. For months, I've been the perfect target. Trusting, predictable, financially stable, emotionally dependent. You've been documenting my weaknesses, planning my destruction, and celebrating how easy it was all going to be. Did you think I was too stupid to notice, or just too broken to fight back? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I found your notebook, Lena. Project Liberation. Very creative name. I particularly enjoyed the part about my emotional dependence working in your favor. The room went silent. Mara looked like she wanted to disappear. Evan looked like he was reconsidering every life choice that had led him to this moment. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. Mara, you're going to pack up your legal documents and leave. If I discover you've been providing professional services to aid in defrauding me, I'll file a complaint with the State Bar Association. You can't prove. I can prove whatever I need to prove. I'm very good with documentation. She started shoving papers into her briefcase, her professional composure cracking. "Evan, you're going to stop coming around. Stop calling. Stop existing in my wife's life. Because if I see you again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining the natural consequences of your choices. You decided to involve yourself in my marriage. Now you get to uninvolve yourself. Permanently." He looked to Lena for support, but she was staring at the table, tears streaming down her face. "And Lena," I said, my voice softening just slightly, "you get to decide what happens next. We can try to work this out like adults, or we can let the lawyers handle it. But either way, Project Liberation is over. The only question is whether you want to salvage anything from the wreckage." I left them sitting there and went back to my office. 20 minutes later, I heard cars leaving. When I came back downstairs, Lena was alone at the kitchen table crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this." "What do you want me to do?" I sat down across from her, looking at the woman I'd loved for 8 years, trying to find some remnant of the person I'd married. "I want you to tell me the truth, all of it, and then we'll see if there's anything left worth saving." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months: genuine emotion instead of calculated performance. "It started 6 months ago," she began, "and for the first time in weeks, I listened to my wife tell me the truth. The truth, as it turned out, was worse than I'd imagined and somehow more pathetic than I'd feared. It had started," Lena explained through tears and halting confessions, "not with Evan, but with money. The bookstore was failing, had been failing for over a year, and she'd been too proud and too scared to tell me. The loans I'd discovered were just the tip of the iceberg. She'd been using credit cards, borrowing from friends, even taking cash advances against the store's equipment. I kept thinking I could fix it," she sobbed. "Just one more month, one more season, one big sale," but it kept getting worse. Evan had appeared during this crisis like a shark. He'd presented himself as a successful businessman who could help turn the store around, but his real interest had been in Lena herself, specifically in what he could gain through her. "He said you'd never understand, that you'd just see the numbers and want to shut everything down. He made it sound like you were the enemy." The affair had been Evan's idea, a way to ensure Lena's loyalty while he worked to separate her from her assets. Mara's involvement had come later, when Evan convinced Lena that divorce was inevitable and she needed to protect herself financially. "He said you'd try to take everything, that I needed to strike first, or I'd end up with nothing." I listened to all of this with the detached fascination of a pathologist examining a particularly interesting corpse. The woman I'd married had been systematically manipulated by a con artist who'd identified her vulnerabilities and exploited them with surgical precision. But that didn't excuse her choices. It didn't erase the months of lies, the betrayal, the calculated cruelty of Project Liberation. "What was the end game?" I asked when she finished. "After you'd taken half of everything, after the divorce was final, what then?" "Evan said we'd move away, start fresh somewhere else. He had business opportunities, investments that would set us up for life." "And you believed him?" She looked down at her hands. "I wanted to believe him. I was so scared, Caleb. The store was fading. We were growing apart. I felt like I was failing at everything. He made me feel like I could still have a future." The tragic part was that I understood. Lena had always been driven by fear of failure, fear of disappointment, fear of being ordinary. Evan had weaponized those fears against both of us, but understanding didn't equal forgiveness. "Show me the books," I said. "All of them. I want to see exactly how bad this is." The next 3 hours were a masterclass in financial catastrophe. The bookstore was hemorrhaging money, had been for 18 months. The business opportunities Evan had mentioned were either non-existent or obvious scams. Lena had been manipulated, but she'd also been willfully blind to red flags that would have been obvious to anyone with basic financial literacy. $68,000, I said finally, closing the last ledger. That's what you've lost trying to keep this place afloat, plus the 43 I've been contributing, plus whatever you've borrowed elsewhere. You're looking at 6 figures of debt, minimum. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't pay creditors, Lena. And it doesn't explain why you thought destroying our marriage was a better solution than just talking to me. I was afraid you'd leave me anyway. If you knew how badly I'd screwed up, how much money I'd lost. So instead, you decided to leave me first, after stealing as much as you could carry. She flinched like I'd slapped her. It wasn't supposed to be stealing. Mara said it was just protecting my interests. Mara was helping you commit fraud, and Evan was planning to disappear the moment he got his hands on whatever you managed to extract from our assets. You don't know that. I pulled out my phone and showed her a series of screenshots I'd taken earlier that day. Evan Royce, real name, Edward Rourke, 3 previous aliases, 2 states, 4 women who've filed complaints for financial fraud. He's been running this same scam for years, Lena. You were just the latest mark. The color drained from her face as she scrolled through the police reports, the court documents, the testimonials from other women who'd been seduced and robbed by the man she'd thought was her salvation. This isn't possible. He showed me his business license, his investment portfolio. All fake. I hired a private investigator yesterday. Edward, whoever he is, he's a professional, and you made it easy for him. She dropped the phone like it had burned her. Oh God, what have I done? You've destroyed our marriage, bankrupted your business, and nearly became the victim of a sophisticated con game. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? The next week was a blur of lawyers, accountants, and very difficult conversations. Lena agreed to cooperate fully in documenting Evan's fraud, which helped when we filed reports with both local police and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She also agreed to sign over her remaining interest in the bookstore to me, since I was going to be responsible for its debts anyway. Mara, faced with potential disbarment and criminal charges, suddenly developed a very cooperative attitude. She provided documentation of every conversation she'd had with Evan, every piece of advice she'd given Lena, every step in the Project Liberation timeline. Her legal career was probably over, but she avoided jail time. Evan himself proved more elusive. By the time the police went to his apartment, he was gone, along with whatever money he'd managed to extract from Lena and God knows how many other women. But his luck ran out in Nevada, where he was arrested trying to run the same scam on a casino owner's wife. Apparently, some marks fight back harder than others. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable, given everything that had happened. Lena kept the house, I didn't want it anymore, but also kept responsibility for most of the debts her business had accumulated. I kept my retirement accounts, my investments, and my self-respect. The bookstore closed in February. I bought the building at the bankruptcy auction and turned it into a coffee shop. Business has been excellent. I never saw Lena again after the final court hearing, but I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved back in with her parents and was working as a paralegal in another state. Mara had been disbarred and was reportedly selling insurance. Evan was serving 18 months in federal prison and would probably be deported when he got out. As for me, I kept boxing at Mick's gym, kept my job at the financial firm, and eventually started dating again. It took a while to trust anyone, but I learned to read people better, to ask harder questions, to verify instead of just believing. The funny thing is, I'm actually grateful for Project Liberation, not for the betrayal or the pain, but for what it taught me about myself. For years, I'd been the kind of man who let other people define his worth, who prioritized peace over truth, who confused being nice with being good. Lena's attempt to destroy me had the opposite effect. It forced me to become someone stronger, someone who wouldn't be anyone's easy mark ever again. 3 years later, I was sitting in my new coffee shop, the one built in the ruins of Lena's bookstore, when Mrs. Patterson stopped by for her usual afternoon latte. "You know," she said, settling into her favorite chair by the window, "I always thought that wife of yours was up to no good. Too many late nights, too many mysterious visitors. A woman my age notices these things. Why didn't you say anything at the time?" She smiled and sipped her coffee. "Would you have believed me?" I thought about that for a moment. The old Caleb, the trusting one, the one who'd prioritized harmony over truth? No, he wouldn't have believed her. He'd have made excuses, rationalized the inconsistencies, chosen comfortable lies over difficult realities. But the man I'd become? He would have listened. "Probably not," I admitted. "But I would now." "Good," she said. "That's progress." Outside, snow was falling on the quiet suburban street, where I'd once lived a lie disguised as a marriage. Inside, my coffee shop was warm and bright and honest, a business built on transparent transactions, fair prices, and genuine service. I'd learned something valuable from Project Liberation. The best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or calculated cruelty. It's simply refusing to be the person someone else tried to make you. Lena had tried to reduce me to a mark, a target, a source of assets to be extracted and discarded. Instead, she'd created someone who would never be vulnerable to that kind of manipulation again. In the end, her project had liberated me more than it had ever liberated her.